Welcome back, everybody, to yet another episode of the OLA Adult Dad Faith Formation Weekly Gospel Podcasts, where you and I get to sit down for about 15 minutes, usually a little bit more, I'll be honest, and kind of unpack the Sunday Gospel, so when we hear it proclaimed at Mass, we'll have a better understanding of and appreciation for what the Word of God has for us. This is the fifth Sunday of the Easter season. We are going to be drawing from the Gospel of John, and we're going to title this one, Jesus Gives a New Commandment. Now, if you're thinking, wait a second, Charles, Jesus gave a new commandment? I thought there were 10 and only 10 commandments. Have I missed one? Was there an 11th one? What's going on here? Well, our job between now and the end of the podcast will be to kind of flesh all that out and kind of understand in what vein Jesus gives this new commandment. So we're in the Gospel of John. Specifically, we're in John chapter 13, and it's a split reading. We're going to look at verses 31 to 33, and then we're going to jump to verses 34 to 35. Now, if you're listening very closely and you haven't already zoned out, you're saying, wait a second, Charles, 31 to 33, and then we're going to jump to 34 to 35? Well, 34 comes right after 33. So where is the split? Why don't we just say John 13, verses 31 to 35? Well, it turns out that what makes this technically and literally a split reading is we get 31 to 33a, just the first half of verse 33. Then we skip the second half of verse 33, do 34 or 35. So what makes this a split reading, even though it doesn't appear that way, is the church skips the second half of verse 33. Now, if you're wondering, well, what is the second half of verse 33, and why does the church skip it? Why doesn't it just go verses 31 to 35 inclusive? Well, I just happen to have a Bible next to me, which is good because we're basically unpacking a Bible passage. And let's read the second half of verse 33, the part that the church skips. So this is 33a. My little children, I shall not be with you much longer. That's what the church gives us. This is what the church skips. You will look for me, and as I told the Jews, where I am going, you cannot come. That's the second half of verse 33 that the church skips for this particular Sunday. Now, if you ask, well, why does the church skip it? You will look for me, and as I told the Jews, where I am going, you cannot come. Basically, what he's telling them about is where he is going, and they cannot come, at least now, is the cross, death, and eventually resurrection and heaven, okay? And since this passage really isn't focused on that, it's focused on Jesus giving them that new commandment, the church kind of skips over that, and in doing so, it keeps our focus, it keeps our eye on the ball, so to speak, and the ball in this case is Jesus giving a new commandment. So that's what makes it a split reading. That's the second half of the verse 33 that the church skips. That's why it skips it. Now, as far as what it does give us, let's start our unpacking. Now, I mentioned John chapter 13. Whenever we hear John 13, what comes to mind is this is the beginning of a chunk of chapters, chapters 13 to 17, which happen in the upper room, which the church has always called the upper room discourse. So if you're looking at John 13 to John 17, the location is the upper room. And it says, this is John 13, that's where we are. The setting is the upper room. It's Holy Thursday night. And Jesus is on the eve of going to the cross. He is having a last meal with his disciples, the Last Supper. He is talking to them for the last time, hence the discourse, the upper room discourse. And we also have the foot washing going on. Okay. Now, this particular few verses is part of the larger upper room discourse. So that's the setting. He's in the upper room, Holy Thursday night, eve of going to the cross, and he's speaking to his disciples. Let's pick up the narrative as John records it. When Judas had left them, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him." So John gives us the detail that what Jesus is going to be telling his disciples, not only in these verses, but from this point on, Judas is gone. He's telling the other 11, okay? And he's saying, when Judas leaves the room, he's saying, now the Son of Man is glorified and God is glorified in him, all right? And what Jesus is talking about, the now is what's going to happen in the next literally few hours. His passion, his death, and his resurrection. And in undergoing his passion, death, and resurrection, he's going to glorify God, and in turn, God is going to be glorified in him. Why? Because he's fulfilling exactly his Father's divine redemptive plan, and in doing so, he's defeating Satan. Okay? So that's how he's going to glorify God, and that's how God is glorified in him. Now, he continues, "My children, I will be with you only a little while longer." And that's true because this is Holy Thursday night. The next morning and the next afternoon, he's going to go through his passion and death. So, "My children, I will be with you only a little while longer." And notice what Jesus calls them. He doesn't say, "Hey guys." He doesn't even say, "My disciples." He doesn't say, "My friends." He refers to them as children. And that gives us a window into just, the relationship that Jesus and the disciples have built up during the past 3 years of Jesus' public ministry, okay? It's so close and so intimate a relationship that he addresses them as not just children, but my children. And by extension, once we're baptized, we all become adopted sons and daughters of God. We all become children of God. So since we're adopted children of God, because we have that close connection with Jesus, beginning with our baptism, that's the same kind of relationship he had with his disciples, close enough that he can refer to them endearingly as my children. And he tells them he's not going to be with them a little longer, which is true because the next day is his passion and death. And now, this is where the passage gets its title. Jesus gives them a new commandment. He says, "My children, I will be with you only a little while longer." And here's the kind of the focus of this passage. "I give you a new commandment." And this is the commandment. "Love one another." Okay? "As I have loved you, so you also should love one another." That is the new commandment that he gives the disciples, okay? Love one another as I have loved you. You're to love one another as I have loved you. Now, what makes this a, quote, new commandment? When we hear Jesus gives a new commandment, what is new, if you will, about this commandment? Well, if we go back to our old buddy, the Old Testament, okay, in the law of Moses, the Jewish people, the Israelites, the Jewish people, they were commanded, to love your neighbor. And at that point, love your neighbor meant your fellow Jewish people, okay? It did not necessarily mean the Gentiles. Because remember, the Gentiles, they were considered unclean. They were considered defiled. You didn't want to be anywhere near them. You didn't want to touch them. You didn't want to touch what they touched. So love your neighbor, back in the Old Testament, the law of Moses, was considered love your fellow Jewish person. Jesus, in the parable of the Good Samaritan, expands that. Because in the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus is saying, yes, love your neighbor, but now let's redefine and expand who your neighbor is. It's not just your fellow Jewish brethren. It's the Gentiles too. It's everybody. So initially, love your neighbor, just the Jews. Jesus expands it in the parable of the Good Samaritan. Love your neighbor, but now neighbor is Jews and Gentiles. And here, Jesus expands it even further. Because now Jesus is saying, yes, as of the parable of the Good Samaritan, yes, love your neighbor, love everybody, Jew and Gentile. But Jesus, in essence, is telling them, now I'm going to tell you how to love everybody, to what extent, to what degree to love everybody. And you are to love your neighbor, yes. Neighbor meaning everybody, yes. But what's new about this is the degree to which he expands this love. Love your neighbor as I have loved you. And how does Jesus love them? He loves them sacrificially. It's a sacrificial type love because he's on the eve of going to his passion and death for them and for all of us. So that's the new part of this commandment, okay? It's a deepening of a commandment that's been kind of being redefined and expanded all along the way. Initially, love your neighbor, just the Jewish people. Then love your neighbor, Jews and Gentiles. Now love your neighbor, Jews and Gentiles, but love them sacrificially, all right? So it's a sacrificial love. It's the type of love that's new in this commandment. The commandment's the same, love your neighbor. But what makes it new is the way in which you love them sacrificially. Because back then there were three types of love. There was what's called philios type love, which is like a brotherly type love. Philios, Philadelphia, city of brotherly love. So there was philios love, which is a brotherly type of love. There was eros love, which is a romantic type of love, where we get the term erotic from. And then there's agape love, and that's the sacrificial type love. And that's the type of love Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, look, guys, I have agape type love for you. I have sacrificial love for you. And so since that's the degree of love I have for you, since that's the kind of love I have for you, that's the kind of love you are to have for each other. That's the kind of love a Christian is to have for everybody. Okay? Because, and then he goes on to say, one way that you can show people that you really are a disciple of mine is if you love this way. Because he says, this is how all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So he's saying, okay, this is the kind of love, this is the degree of love you want to have, okay? And to the degree that you have this kind of love, you're showing that you're actually a true disciple of mine, okay? So that's what's going on in these couple of verses, all right? Interestingly enough, this is John 13. In John 15, 2 chapters from now, still in the upper room discourse, Jesus is going to touch on this again. Because in John chapter 15, verse 13, 2 chapters later, a little bit later on in this discourse, a little bit later on Holy Thursday night, he's going to say, greater love has no man than to lay down his life for his friends. And that's exactly what Jesus is on the eve of doing. He's going to lay down his life for his friends. He's going to go to the cross. So basically, what if we were to kind of summarize kind of what should we have gleaned from this particular passage in this podcast is, yes, on Holy Thursday night in that upper room during the upper room discourse, among the many things Jesus tells his disciples is he gives them, quote, a new commandment. And the new part of this commandment is not the commandment itself. It's always been that way, love your neighbor. But it's been expanded and deepened to love your neighbor with agape-type love, with sacrificial love. Why? That's how I love you. That's how you are to love each other. And if you can do that, that's how you can show that you're truly one of my disciples. So, just a relatively few verses, a kind of curious name, a new commandment. But hopefully now we know what's new about it. And what Jesus is trying to get across to his disciples, one of the things he's trying to get across on the eve of going to his passion and death, and that is the degree to which they are to love one another and therefore show that they are, in fact, his disciples. So that's John chapter 13, verses 31 to 33a, and then 34 and 35. And now let's come full circle and revisit again why the church leaves out the second half of 33, okay? Because again, the church wants us to keep our eye on the ball. Our ball is Jesus giving this new commandment and what that new commandment consists of, how it's new. And the second half of 33 talks about him going where they cannot go yet. And it kind of takes our eye a little off the ball of the import of this passage. So the church wants us to stay focused like a laser beam on this new commandment of sacrificial type love, so it kind of extracts out that part about Jesus going where they can't go yet. So with that, hopefully that was understood. Hopefully the passage itself is understood. Hey, I'm not doing too bad. It's just about 16 minutes. I think I'll quit while I'm ahead. And hopefully you're having a blessed and holy Easter season. And until next week, the 6th week of the Easter season, from the campus of St. Bonaventure High School, with Max behind the camera, with the pause button next to me, which I don't think I used today. And Max is shaking his head no. A couple of firsts here. I'm Charles Merritt. Take care and God bless.